With me now to talk about his latest book is Steve Soukup, Vice President and publisher of The Political Forum, as well as the author of The Dictatorship of Woke Capital, How Political Correctness Captured Big Business. Steve, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're glad to have you, and we're so thankful that you've dug into this issue because it's a question that I know a lot of people are asking. To start, when did you first start seeing a move of corporate America to the left?
Well, to be perfectly blunt, I started seeing it more than 20 years ago. When I started in the financial services business in the mid-1990s, I joined an award-winning Washington research office at a large brokerage house. And within 5 years, our work, which focused primarily on the risks that corruption posed to American business and to American capital markets, was no longer well received by our superiors. And they had a little talk with us about how we were attacking political corruption because they were friends with the administration, which in the late 1990s was the Clinton administration. So this is something that I've noticed has been an issue for quite some time. It's only started to take on a much more sinister tone and a much more aggressive tone, probably within the past, say, 10 or 15 years, though.
Yeah, that seems to be true. As with so many things culturally, it seems to be escalating, right? That the rate of growth seems to be picking up. Now, you've worked inside corporate America and you've studied this issue. From your perspective, is the move left by corporate America? Is this driven by profit margin? They think this is the best way to make money. Is this people within these companies who are just these are an expression of their own personal political beliefs? Do they think they just need to do this to survive? What do you think is primarily driving this?
Well, I think there are two types of actors in this drama. The first is the true believer. And not only are they true believers, but they're Gnostics. They believe that they understand the way to move American business and American society more generally toward a happier, more peaceful, more productive end. And they understand this better than anyone and in ways that nobody else has ever understood it before. But there's a second group as well that sees that this is very profitable and has jumped on the bandwagon and very much would like to make as much money as they can, similar to St. Augustine before they are converted to the faith.
Now, does the data suggest that this is profitable? And we've seen companies do this in various ways. We go back to, Walmart exerting pressures on state legislators 5-6 years ago. We see what Major League Baseball is doing. We saw what Target did. Is there reason for these corporate boardrooms to believe that if we move hard to the left and we do so publicly, that this is going to improve our profit margins?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's any reason for them to believe that. I think that a lot of corporate executives are scared. They're scared of their employees. They're scared of outside activists, and they're scared of some of their more prominent and larger activist shareholders. Mm-hmm. And that's primarily what motivates them is their fear that if they don't do something, that they're going to suffer the consequences. And specifically with respect to these large asset management firms, a lot of them have made it a priority and a very public priority that they will push corporations either to change their behavior or they will use their leverage as large shareholders to change executives, to change boards of directors, and to change bylaws of the company.
So when you talk about these holding companies that are invested in some of these companies, is this as simple as somebody from one of these asset managers, they make a phone call to a Target, to a Major League Baseball, to an American Airlines, to a Delta Airlines, and they say, hey, we need you to do this or else? Or is it more subtle than that?
It's probably more subtle than that, although I can't say for sure. Larry Fink, who is the CEO of BlackRock, which is the largest asset management firm in the world, with almost $9 trillion in assets under management, has made it clear over the past 2 years that he believes that there is a certain social and environmental standard that his company wishes for the companies that they invest in to maintain. And if they do not maintain those standards, that his firm, with its $9 trillion in leverage, will punish them and will move to change management and to change directors.
And, when you have that kind of leverage, you can understand why somebody would actually, why that would be pressure that might work. Now, Steve, in your book, The Dictatorship of Woke Capital, How Political Correctness Captured Big Business, and we encourage you to go get that book, you talk about how the traditional left has died. What do you mean by that?
Well, what we mean by that is that the economic left, the left that was, that grew out of Marx and dominated Western Europe throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, has largely been abandoned. The economic theories that Marx presented were pretty clearly a failure. His predictions for revolution were also pretty clearly failures. And so, in response, the Marxists, both at the end of World War I and then at the end of World War II again, had to figure out how to respond to that. And the way they responded was essentially to say, this isn't about us, this isn't about the economy, this is about the culture. We need to change the culture before we can change anything else. And so that has become the primary focus of the left in the West ever since, is to change the culture and to capture the cultural institutions rather than to focus specifically on economics and controlling the means of production.
When you say that, it's interesting to me because when you hear the term culture warrior, I think most people would associate that with kind of conservative Christian right-wing activism. Do you think that the left wing is culture warring just as aggressively?
Oh, I think more so. In the early 1920s, Antonio Gramsci, the Italian Marxist, and Lukács, the Hungarian Marxist, and then a handful of German Marxists who eventually became the Frankfurt School, acknowledged that their revolution didn't occur because the hegemonic culture prevented workers from understanding their true selves and their true interests. And so they made a concerted effort and a very aggressive effort to take the institutions of cultural transmission, which they've done over the last 100 years. They've taken media and entertainment and education and mainstream religion, and now they've finally reached the last institution that had been resistant to this, which is big business.
Now, I've had this conversation with people because in the first few months, first 100 days of the Biden administration, it's been curious how much he has prioritized transgender issues with his executive orders, with the Equality Act. Are these related in any sense? Because it's not a massive voting bloc. Do you think there's any connection, kind of what the corporate world is trying to do culturally, and President Biden's prioritization of these issues, which are certainly cultural issues?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that, if you put Larry Fink from BlackRock and President Biden in a room and had them talk about these issues, that either one of them would grasp the connection. But the transformation of Western civilization focused very heavily on sexual behavior, sexual rules, sexual mores, because both the early post-World War I Marxists, and then later Herbert Marcuse and some of the critical theorists in the United States focused very, very, very heavily on sexual behavior, seeing sex and sexual perversity and sexual dynamism, I guess, as the key to undermining the traditional Christian cultural milieu. And so, yes, they focused very heavily on sexual behavior and specifically on encouraging what would have traditionally been considered aberrant or very, very fringe sexual action. So, this is very much a part of it.
And a moral revolution takes place when that which was once celebrated is now condemned, and that which was once condemned is now celebrated. And we can see on a whole range of issues how that has taken place. Now, Steve, what recommend? If the goal here is to depoliticize business, what do you recommend? How do you see that happening, or do you see that happening?
Well, it's not going to be easy. There are two steps, I think, that need to be taken, or two different strategies that need to be taken. The first of which is to, an immediate strategy, to understand what's going on, to learn who's responsible, to learn who's doing it and why they're doing it, and then to take back what is yours. Take back the capital that you have invested in your retirement fund, in your 401k, in your IRA, and use that more specifically to invest in funds or in corporations that don't promote political ideas above shareholder value. Likewise, take back your consumer dollars and spend them where you feel comfortable. So take back what is yours, understand what the problem is, take back what is yours. The second strategy, which is a much longer-term strategy, is that we're going to have to make the long march back through the institutions. We will have to take these institutions back that the cultural left took over the last century. And that's going to take probably several decades, so it's not something that we can anticipate starting now and being done with it the next couple of years. It's going to be a long, hard slog.
It was a long, slow march to get to this point, and so it makes sense that it's going to be a long, slow march back to that point. But the alternative is quitting, which I'm certainly not open to that idea. You talk about how people can put their funds places that are not undermining what we're trying to do culturally. How do the average investor find that? Do you have any recommendations for where somebody can go to make sure that they're not in their 401k funding the enemy, so to speak?
Well, you get a quarterly statement that will tell you what funds your retirement savings are invested in, and you can look. And basically, if you see anything that says BlackRock or State Street or even Vanguard now, what you'll understand is that even if they're not explicitly socially responsible or ESG friendly, they are nevertheless, because of the pronouncements of their the CEOs of these asset management firms, they are directly contributing to this idea that corporations should be overtly political.
Now, Steve, we've talked kind of about the investment, the institutional money side of this. There's also in the corporate space, there's the social media companies, which in many ways control the public conversations. Many people would argue they've become public forums, so they're no longer private companies. Where do you fall on that?
Well, the social media companies, I'm less concerned about than I am about, for example, Amazon's domination of the web services arena. Okay. It was bad enough, and it was unfortunate for Apple and Google to remove Parler from their app stores. But when Apple Web Services took them off the internet, that was the huge blow.
Steve Soukup, we're going to have to cut you off there because we are out of time, but we thank you very much for your time. And folks, go pick up his book, The Dictatorship of Woke Capital. You won't be sad you did. Thank you, Steve.